Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Swartz podcast.
Transgender people under the age of 18 face laws that ban gender-affirming care in 25 states, half the country. Just a few years ago, not a single state had such a law.
Leave them alone, leave them alone. What the fuck is wrong with you? Leave them alone, leave them alone. What the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? Come on, what the fuck? Let them play sports, let them have fun, let them go to school. Let them read books, let them have friends, let them take a fucking test. Without you all up in their fucking business! Leave them alone, leave them alone. What the fuck is wrong with you? Leave them alone, leave them alone. What the fuck is wrong with you? That's the shit like trans kids live. Just leave them alone. They're just kids. Leave them alone. They're just fucking kids. Just leave them alone. Just leave them alone. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Welcome back to the show. I am still adding the links now because I forgot to get the link before we went live. So I'm incapable of doing it right. And what can I say? So we're live now, and I've put the link up on YouTube, and I've put it out on Twitter, and now I've got all you wonderful people already with me, and thanks a lot for coming on the show. I'm really excited to be here today with Gavin Grimm and Andres DeBraw, my lovely co-hosts. And we are going to start off talking about trans rights or lack thereof here in our country. Recently, they've gone sort of full-blown Nazi illegal, round people up for actually trans people and immigrants. And we're going to be talking a little bit about both. Let's start off with Gavin Grimm giving us an update. Take it away, Gavin.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here for another episode of this. I wanted to mention, well, first of all, looking back I think it was December maybe, that the gender liberation movement, late December, when they stayed to sit in at the Capitol Hill bathroom and several people were arrested. And I mean, taking the question of where we are since then, has anything significantly changed for better or for worse? And it looks like things are a lot more frightening now than even then, when it felt like one of the priorities of the Trump administration was to come out hard and fast against trans people immediately, which I should say was exactly what he did the first time, when one of his first executive orders at the time was to vacate Obama-era guidance interpreting Title IX to include protections for transgender people in schools. So, this is more of the same for his legacy so far. There was a federal lawsuit that some people, we expected some of these to happen, and I think in a lot of cases there's not a lot of hope that they go well anymore. But 7 transgender and non-binary individuals brought a federal lawsuit against the Trump administration for refusing to issue passports to reflect the gender that is consistent with their identities, rather than documents consistent with their sex assigned at birth. So we're going to be seeing that work its way through the courts and see what happens with that. In the meantime,
and the point of the show is fighting back. That we're trying to feature the people that are pushing back and talk about some of those cases and stuff. And I forgot to mention that. I just wanted to. That's why all of these are sort of proactive. What people are doing to push back. So I forgot that. Go ahead, Gavin.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah, and so I mean, part of why this is the update on trans stuff, but also these are transparently excuses to erode all of our civil liberties at the end of the day. I mean, um, that is the bottom line, and that is reflected across pretty much any issue you see being waged within the administration right now. If you're taking immigration rights, for example, recently we saw some impressive moments of people standing up and fighting back. There were churches and school systems that entered the premises, but then as early as, you know, it might have been this morning or yesterday, very recently, there's a new memo from the, I think, Justice Department saying that ICE doesn't need warrants to execute their searches of people's homes. And so now we have
There it
raids
is.
happening. I mean, there's no rule of law at this point, no right to due process. We also have agents raiding the homes of pro-Palestine protesters, student protesters, with allegations, sometimes with no allegations at all, and they just, raid their home, sometimes with my elderly cat just came in and meowed. I don't know if that was audible, but and then you have, she said down with the system. That's what she said. And now you have examples of students being raided with no warrants, no due process, electronic seized, being forced or coerced to give biometric information or unlock their phones, which should be, by the way, let's just take a moment to say, if your face or fingerprint unlocks your phone, take it off. Don't do that. Take it off immediately. Take it off right now. Or maybe after the stream, take it off. Get rid of it. Don't let your fingerprint or your face unlock your phone, just as a rule of thumb, or any other sensitive information that you just don't want someone to easily coerce out of you. But anyway,
it's not a good password.
No, your face is not a good password.
It's like no password. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so all of these things tied together, being that this is a clear assault on the rights of all of us, with the pretext of assaulting these communities, transgender people, or immigrants, or people who say things we don't like. The state doesn't like, at least. The state is now attacking these groups of people under the pretense of this shared, social unacceptability of the perception, either racism, transphobia, what have you, and it's affecting all of us. All of us have fewer rights right now than we did on election night, and it's really horrifying how quickly this is snowballing, and how there's no oversight to who is considered a target of these kinds of warrantless and completely without due process attacks against their individual liberties. And as I've been saying for a very long time, if you think they're stopping at trans people, absolutely not. And it's just been, it was very clear in the first Trump administration. For those who needed a second try to be really sure that's what's happening, that's what's happening.
Yeah. And the point is that one or another of these, well, once you say you don't need a warrant, that's pretty much it anyway. And even though the evidence obtained that way technically shouldn't be allowed in court because it was obtained illegally, that would have to work its way through the courts while you're rotting in jail somewhere, or you've been exported. They're exporting. They're deporting, exporting. It's horrible. They're shipping people out on Amazon because it's cheaper. It's like
we're like a year away from that, I suspect.
I saw, there was somebody that was hiding in a box in one of my TV shows, and it made me think of that. But in all fairness, the way that they transport these people is often not much better than that. They're shipped in groups. We've seen the footage that they're showing, the footage that they showed of, I'm sorry, I don't have his name on the tip of my tongue. The man that was deported to El Salvador, that is an American citizen. They show us this footage of him in chains with 20 other guards with their heads down, and that's supposed to reassure us that he's okay. The last time he was seen, look, he's fine. There he is. And it's like horrifying what they show us. Oh, thank you, Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. Thank you very much. You. Grant gave me the name, and we need to keep saying his name, and keep keep the pressure up until he is back home, because he is definitely see, she agrees, because he's definitely a litmus test for just how far they can take that shit. And because
Right.
he's still a Latino, has, you know, a Latin based name, it's easy for certainly the racist Americans, but all Americans also be like, oh, maybe he is, you know, maybe his paperwork's not right, maybe this, maybe that. But it's like, no, here's an American that belongs here on American soil. And he was, and the idea that instead of following the judge's order, who ordered him to be home and ordered daily reports on his whereabouts and everything, he just talks to, Andre, is it the president of El Salvador? Who did he talk to? Trump just went to the head of El Salvador and said, "Yeah, we don't really have to bring him back, do we?" And they're like, "No, I don't think so." And so, as far as I know, he is still there, being held completely illegally. And as far as I'm concerned, it's an absolute international incident now that he is being held, and the authorities see, she agrees, and the authorities know where he is and that he's being held illegally. And because there's some kind of President's Boys Club, they're holding him. He's still there.
I will say there's of El Salvador, Bukele, that said that wouldn't deport a terrorist. So he's using Trump's arguments to justify maintaining him in jail.
Right. Regardless of what he's saying, he's not sending him home.
Yeah.
That was the point, right?
I also don't think it's necessarily clear that I don't know that we have evidence to be confident that officials actually do know exactly where he is. I think it's important to point out that in prisons like these, it's people get injured, get sick, they die, they disappear. So I don't know that we trust that we have good information, that we know exactly where he is and how good of the condition he is in. But maybe we do. I'm not saying it's definitive that we don't either. That being said, I think it's also important to point out that this is sort of my cat. She can't stand me doing it. She's so sweet. That's my almost 20-year-old cat howling in the background.
Yeah, she can come on your lap or anything.
If she'll hop up on the bed, I'll show everyone my angel. But she just doesn't. This is where we give her medication, so she doesn't usually elect to hop up here. Oh, here she comes.
Oh, okay.
But I also want to say, here's my angel. Let's take a pause so I don't devalue this really important conversation. Let's take a quick little moment to say hello to Rascal. Oh, this angel she's been sick, Rascal. And she's been feeling a lot better. So
I'm so glad she
light
looks
of my life.
a lot better. Yeah,
thank you. I think so too.
Glad. Good kitty.
Yeah,
so just continue.
Okay.
Rascal can stay.
So yeah,
just continue.
I'll let Rascal sit beside me. And so anyway, the United States,
seen him, right? The point is they're not showing.
We haven't seen him. We don't know
picture of him
right.
For like weeks.
We don't know how he's doing. We don't know exactly for sure where he is, other than somewhere in that nightmare hell of a prison. And also, the United States has been detaining people with a pretrial, even without formal charges, for months and years, and losing people in a bureaucratic system in the paperwork, sort of sense. We've been doing this for decades and decades. This is not necessarily something that is new, but the scale that we are now operating on, and also now exporting people to this other country in this other prison, it's a horrifying escalation of something that's been fairly common practice for a long time now.
Yeah. And the way they're talking about shining up Guantanamo and shipping people there, the whole thing's already completely out of control. I fear certainly what kind of condition he's in if he is down there, because when they don't show him, when somebody gets lost and then they find him, they almost always show them to show, here they are, quit your whining, he's fine, right? And then it's less of it's easier to sort of downplay that he's still in custody, because you see him every day, and they might even do a press conference. They might even do a press conference or whatever. Like if he's on his way home, sometimes they do like a press conference or whatever. They make a thing out of it. See, we're doing the right thing. We're sending him home, and all that shit. We're getting like none of that, right? We're getting fuck you. We know he's in El Salvador. We're not sending him home. What are you going to do about it?
We're not even getting signals that there's an open discussion at this point. It seems like there's I mean, I don't know what at this point could force the hand of a megalomaniac like Trump, but it's really horrifying.
There was a Democrat senator, Chris Van Hollen, that went there to meet him, and they actually had a photograph, but we don't know what happened after. I mean, he's not.
A photograph of him down there, but not with.
Was he with the senator in a
was
meeting.
He with Garcia, or was he was? Oh, well, I stand corrected. If there's a photograph of him, about not a single photograph.
And then Trump showed a photograph of his hand to prove that his tattoos was how can I say, connection to Venezuelan drug dealers and cartels.
Oh, so, they try to talk about gang tattoos.
Yeah, they still accuse him even after all this.
Can you find that picture? Is that picture findable? Or
I can share it.
Yeah, share it real quick, just so we can be like, okay, here's the picture. And so the senator saw him, and what? He didn't bring him home with him like he should have.
Yeah,
right?
He had
wasn't
some
allowed
kind of a conversation in a public place.
No, I don't think it'll come up for me very long because it's a New York Times article. Yeah, mine are blocked. I don't have.
I tried to share the screen, so.
Share your screen. You can share your screen.
It's
along the bottom.
Background. Yeah, I did it already. It's on the back. I think Grant has to.
Oh, Grant, can you show visible. His screen? I can't tell. Can you show the screen? There we go. Okay, and then make it bigger. Oh, you've got the same block. Okay, so that's him. And this is last week?
It's on the 17th, I think. So 10 days almost.
10 days ago?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we've seen him 10 days ago, but he didn't come home with them. He wasn't able to do anything. Okay. All right. Well, I feel a little better having seen a single picture of him since that other horrible thing that they showed. So I stand corrected on that, but it's still been 10 days, and why isn't he home? And I don't see it a lot. It seems like it's kind of getting forgotten about. Anyway, so we'll give updates every month on this. Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, who is still in El Salvador when he has no business being there. And I mean no business being there. He didn't do anything wrong at all. And if the idea that there's some reason for, and the whole thing, like I said, it is a litmus test, because if he gets forgotten about, then anybody can get forgotten about, and I think that's kind of what they're hoping for. So, Gavin, what else did you want to let us know about? I know we got over into the immigrant thing because they're literally disappearing. Now, what about other cases here in the United States of are there any other serious cases of people getting, picked up and things like that you had in your notes?
Yeah, well, so there was a situation again very recently, maybe as recent as yesterday, the day before, even this morning. I can't remember exactly when these children were taken, but there were either two or three children, and I unfortunately can't navigate over to the source now to get that information, but 2 or 3 children taken now by immigration authorities without, I think, taken alone without their guardians or parents with them. I cannot even. I can't fathom caring if someone is standing on a piece of land legally or illegally in the first place. I think I reject it all entirely. But even pretending to play along with that notion, there seems to be reports just that they're incredibly aggressive in going through with any kind of tip or report that somebody may not be legal, and then they are just disappeared without any kind of due process. And again, this is how, if this is how they're going to treat people who either are or aren't citizens, doesn't matter. A lot of them are, which should scare people more, but it really, at the end of the day, doesn't matter. If they're willing to do this to people, like, they're going to be, it's anybody who the state doesn't agree with very, very soon after. I mean, again, the Palestinian, the students that speak out for Palestinian liberation, getting their homes raided. These are heavily armed agents running. People get shot and killed all the time and things like this. And we even have examples of the police just raiding the wrong house and killing people in those locations. The increased militarization and aggression, and the seemingly like this blank check of go ahead and go against anybody who could potentially be convicted of wrongthink. Is exactly the dystopia that the Republicans especially were whining about. They're gonna send you to jail for pronouns. It's good. The liberal, the woke mind virus, whatever. They're whining about this, and they're creating exactly the conditions that they wanted to pretend that the Democrats even had they don't have the gumption to get anywhere close, quite frankly. And it's just so other than that case of those two individual children, I don't know of other specific examples without navigating away to my source again, unfortunately.
I was able to look up and find something from April 25th from the ACLU that talks about ICE deporting 3 U.S. citizen children.
Yes.
And that they're held isolated. And one of the childs had cancer, was deported without medication. I mean, it just gets worse and worse if you actually look into it.
Right.
So yeah, that's terrible. And I don't know. Again, it's sort of we're at the point where I don't know. This is how I feel most of the time, kind of like I feel right now. I just sort of like deer in the headlights. What's going on? Like, what can we do? And all I can say is to try to keep up with the individual cases is what I'm trying to do.
Right.
I'm trying to,
most importantly, look out for your neighbors. I mean, this is playing out in real time. If you hear tell, so many communities are full of people, oh, my friend's husband is a cop and he jokingly said over dinner that they're preparing to target this one location on Saturday. If you hear the gossip, ring the bell. I mean, these kinds of things are not very smart. This information gets out relatively easily. And make sure you're not being compliant. Make sure you're not engaging in gossip about someone's legal status. Make sure you're shutting that mess down if you're ever witnessing it. If there's resources available for Spanish-speaking people, or maybe another immigrant community is most at risk in your location. Look at the demographics of your community. There's a lot of organizations that have put out, what to do if you are encountered by ICE in English, Spanish, Hindi, Mandarin, any kind of language you want. Distribute those if you're able to. But most importantly, make sure you're not being useful in any way to the machine that is now rounding people up and either deporting or incarcerating them at a absolutely repulsive rate.
Yeah, don't make it easier for them. And at the same time, you have to protect yourself. I get into this a lot. If you find yourself in a situation where you're working for some organization that starts doing, evil things, you have to decide what you want to do and resist the initial urge to just run out and start screaming it from the rooftops. Talk
Absolutely.
to the National Lawyers Guild can be very useful in helping you assess these kinds of things. The EFF is also a good place where you can talk to somebody about what you know and how to best get the information out about it in such a way that it doesn't point back to you, which is the point. Because you don't want to have to end your life or your livelihood, or not have a job and not feed your kids or whatever. You still want to do the right thing, but you don't want to just throw yourself under the bus. And so this is why sometimes you got to wait a minute to try to get the information out. And it's a sticky situation. And I bet a lot of people, a lot of government employees are actually finding themselves. Is there a bird? Is there a bird that's tweeting or something? Is that you?
Yes, I apologize.
Birds. What the hell? Dr.
My mother inherited an African gray Congo parrot from her late mother.
Oh my God.
And she is very verbal. I'll take better care to mute myself in between moments so that it's not distracting.
But she probably just wants to be a part of the conversation if she's that.
Yeah, she hears us in here talking and is just very unhappy to not be part of the conversation.
All right. Oh, see, she knows we're talking about her now.
She's very
we'll
smart.
have to have her on. We'll have to have her on a future show.
She's a very pretty bird.
Parrots are really cool. You can talk to those kind of parrots. They actually talk back, and it's kind of freaky how much they can learn. Actually, a friend of mine had a parrot, and okay, good. So now we know what the strange noise is. We
I apologize.
We were placing bets on whether it was like a crazy neighbor or a bird. And I'm glad it was a bird. So, okay. What else is going on, that you wanted to mention, in your update? I know it's sort of like you could go on forever, but what?
Yeah.
And it's okay if you.
I think we hit my primary notes. I lament often my setup is not the most professional because I'm in between housing situations right now. So I unfortunately don't have a screen over here with all of my notes, because the screen that usually has my notes is also the screen I am broadcasting from.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess I could have written them out ahead of time, but it's one of those things you only realize that in the middle of it that there was an option.
Can't access your thing, yeah.
Right,
no
but I really think that was my three main beats. Also, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but with just cybersecurity in general, given that the state of affairs is such that we can't expect rule of law or the Constitution or decency. We can't expect any of those things to predict the outcome of any situation we might find ourselves in. So, once upon a time, it might have been great to be able to say, well, I'll be protected because I simply won't, consent to some kind of search, or I simply won't, whatever the case may be. We can't rely on those things anymore. So we all, I think, even I don't do anything bad. I'm fine. I don't, every single person needs to get more serious about their general privacy, because the harder it is to get just information scraped from your average person, just for one individual. If the trend is that all of this information isn't very easily accessible all of the time, constantly, and all of us practice really good information security, it just makes it harder in general to easily track down your neighbors and easily assault any kind of speech that the state decides it doesn't like. And so I did want to just give us an important reminder to make sure that we're up to date on, update your devices, make sure your security is as tight as it can be, as tight as you can reasonably stand it being for your type of device usage. I know a lot of people aren't like, well, I'm not going to do a 4-stage puzzle to unlock my phone every time. I get it, but maybe consider alphanumeric passcode or something, and also if it's an important email.
Passcode. An actual
right,
passcode,
yeah, and if it's an important email, maybe consider. Absolutely, if the email you're sending is important or sensitive, or you just, any email you send is the equivalent of like sending a letter in the mail. Anybody can open and read it. So consider using a network like Proton Mail or something like that. Just not that you're doing anything wrong, but because we all need to take seriously things that are rights and privacy, which are quickly being eroded basically every day.
Yes, and Signal.
Absolutely.
Signal is still, and that you see the various conspiracies trying to make Signal look bad every couple of weeks, just to make people worry about Signal. But Signal is secure, and it's all we got right now. And Kind of.
I remember one other thing I wanted to mention. It goes in with the security as well. There's been a lot of protests across the nation, the hands-off protests being one of the notable named ones. Protests in response to what's happening within the Trump administration right now. That's great. Participate if you're able, support if you're not. But above all, if you see anyone doing anything shady, no, you didn't, and stop. Don't take your phone if you can avoid taking your phone. Take the SIM card out if you have to take it. Stop taking pictures of people doing things they probably shouldn't and posting them on the internet. You are doing the police's job for them. I know you want a picture on Facebook of how cool it was that you went to that awesome protest, but maybe just keep it as a pleasant memory, maybe keep it to the private group chat. We end up doing the police's job for them a lot of the times when we post images of actions like that we've been to. Even when nobody does anything wrong, we're seeing these increasingly used as pretext to raid their houses and take their devices, etc. So
and it's not just the people.
Consider that if you do participate in actions.
Yeah, and it's not just the people in the pictures where you're doing the police's work for them. They consider you a subversive too for being there taking pictures. So now, you're like, on a list or whatever. So, and they've been saying this for 20 years, literally just like, don't identify yourself when you go to a protest, and you need to wear a mask for safety, just for germs.
Absolutely.
And this mask thing is something I'm ready to go down for. Like, I'm going to wear a mask in a crowd until the end of my days, and until we get some kind of space age thing where I don't have to actually do it, or some kind of drug where I'm immune.
Bubble purifier around us.
Something, But in general, if I'm in a big crowd of 1,000 people, I'm gonna wear a fucking mask. You know what I mean? And so you may see me in court. No, I'm making a target out of myself. But the point is, we need to be able to wear our masks for safety reasons. And a lot of people already wear bandanas at protests. They've been doing it for years to help with the identity, because that's what cops will do. They'll just take pictures of everybody and go look for them later with face recognition. And that's what they did in Berkeley. That here we had the Department of Homeland Security. The Berkeley police borrowed a bunch of surveillance equipment from the DHS in San Francisco, and just took a bunch of pictures of everybody and ran it through their facial recognition. So it wasn't technical. Berkeley has surveillance laws, stopping them from doing it. So they borrowed the DHS's. Now, why do we know all this? Because of the surveillance policies that Tracy from Oakland Privacy and others made them put in place. They have to report on themselves every year. Is the only way we know. So we find out like 6 or 8 months later, but at least we find out what they do. Right. So this can be done anytime for any reason. The cops don't need permission to just borrow from the feds when there's like a protest. And what's happened is this has become just what they do. It's not like sometimes they do it, or if there's lots of people, they do it, or whatever. In fact, they've been known to be circling very small protests with very large pieces of equipment that they borrowed because they didn't know that there would only be so many people there or whatever. So they overkilled it because it's just what they do now, to get people's faces and names.
Well, and to your point about masking, first of all, we're not only are we still at risk for COVID, but as the planet continues its runaway warming, diseases like these, it's just going to be best practice for the rest of all of our lives, period. That's just true, unfortunately.
Thank you for saying
but
that.
Also, I don't go anywhere without masking. And part of that is because across the nation, mask bans are becoming more prevalent. I don't care if, even if I wasn't the kind of person that cared about not getting airborne communicable diseases, I don't like the government telling me I can't wear a face covering like a surgical mask, for example, for my own health or whatever reason I want to wear one. So to resist these bans, one of the sort of pretexts they're past them is by saying, well, no one's doing that anymore anyway. So it's extra important for us holdouts. And in my community where I live, I won't say exactly where, but I actually see a lot of people, and it's unexpected for the conservative sort of attitude that I expect of the town, which should, maybe tell me something. But a lot of people are still masking around where I am on the East Coast here in Virginia. and it's important to maintain our right to do so, period. Also, going back to the protest, the police circling with very big machines for very small operations. One of the things that they'll do is triangulate people's individual locations from your phone, and then 3 local telephone poles. So in a protest where 1,000 people have their phones on and broadcasting, every single person there jumping off one another's signals, it can be identified almost down to like the foot you're standing in. Whereas if maybe only 50 people were naughty and brought their phones or kept their SIM cards in or what have you, you're getting a lot fewer signals to ping off of to identify a lot fewer people in that space. It's just if you're gonna commit to going to do something like that, it should be considered best practice to protect one another by considering avoiding bringing your phone at all. And if you can afford a $30 flip phone off eBay and then stick a talk phone, a track phone chip in it, even that's safer than, I understand safety reasons why people would want a phone, but we should be taking care of each other. As protest is going to be even more necessary, we need to really, really work our muscles with doing the best practices for keeping each other safe.
Yes, absolutely. And they can also just bring a stingray and suck up everybody's traffic and look through it at their leisure. And that's what they tend to do. Then they go pick people up afterwards, after the protest. So, yeah. So I should say that I got scared from protesting many years ago when I had a particularly violent encounter in 2003 during the Iraqi war protests, when 2 million people protested around the world, and nobody cared. And we all just got beat up. Actually filming, I had to have a friend with me when I went to protests and filmed, so he could watch to make sure I was okay when I was looking through the camera, because I wouldn't see sometimes when like a thing was coming towards me. And so we had to devise this whole system, and we kept having to refine our system. And then we had one day when we had to run from the SWAT cops into a restaurant where everything was fine, like nothing was even happening outside. And we were watching people get the shit beat out of them through the glass. And as long as we ordered food, we were allowed to stay in the restaurant. And so we're sitting there ordering our food going, okay, how are we going to get out of here? Because we got to go back out there to get away, right? But it's still like sort of so surreal, so surreal. And finally, I'm like, okay, I don't feel safe anymore. Fuck this shit. I'm not going anymore. So I'm like I try to help as best I can sitting on my ass. I make a lot of jokes about my sitting on my ass activism. You do so much. Yeah, well, I'm sitting on my ass when I'm doing it because I'm too chicken shit to go out like I used to. I used to protest in front of the immigration office after 9/11. Okay? Something I would never do now. I'm totally afraid to do that now. Right?
Oh, we all have to consider our safety first, for sure. It sounds like you've got your time chips in as well.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's not right. And when I was there 20 years ago, my immigrant friends were thanking me for being there as an American citizen because they really couldn't go because they were afraid they'd get picked up or sent home or whatever. And now I can't even do that, for them because I'm too afraid of my own safety. So I'm just saying I have a thing. I'm not sure protesting, going and showing up to get the shit beat out of you is the most productive thing that everybody can do right now. I think, the surgical protests can be very effective when there's something specific, like outside the court for a court case to show support, like just positive to show support or whatever, or, theatrical stuff. But we've seen people get beat up when they're not moving, like when they're pretending to be bodies in the street, or, you know what I mean? It doesn't protect you necessarily when you're nonviolent. And that is something that's a Rubicon that got crossed, right? It used to be if you were nonviolent, Martin Luther King and all the stuff in the 60s. If you were nonviolent,
so many of those turned into violence when the police attacked people anyway.
Yeah,
right,
and he was killed also.
Right.
Well, yeah, of course he was eventually assassinated. Right. But I'm saying they had their moments when the cops stood there because the cameras were rolling and it would have looked bad. And it's funny how sometimes it looks bad and the cameras are rolling and they'd go do it anyway, and then it would come, like the Chicago Democratic National Convention or something, right? And so the cameras were rolling. Now the cameras are always rolling, and they use the camera as an excuse to beat you up. So even the members of the press can be, and you could be there, member of the press pass. They're not just kettling anymore, right? We used to, in my day, Shani, we worried about getting kettled when we went to protest. They would push us into a thing and keep us there. Oh, it was horrible. Now they just full on come at you, and it's a different thing. So during the protests at the beginning of the pandemic I want to say it was the I Can't Breathe, George
Floyd.
George Floyd, thank you. Me and my technology friends, one of which makes equipment for the NASA Mars rover, we were working on protest armor, because Heather Myers had just been run over, and we were like, oh my God, you got to wear armor to go to a protest now? I mean, seriously, you're like a gladiator now, or a knight or something. You got to like protect yourself to go get beat up, And so it's just, I'm not sure, especially now. I really worry about protesters. That's all.
It's not safe for everybody to do, but certainly the increased violence is part of the point. It's part of the effort to dissuade these actions from being taken in the first place. And I think, many people, either constitutionally, they're not well enough, period. It doesn't matter how or why, or they simply just are not interested in putting themselves in that situation. And there's plenty of ways to support in that case. But for those of us who are still willing or able to do that, I do think it's important, but I agree that it's important that there's sort of like a message or a meaning or a purpose with these things, because the trouble is that long-term efforts to protest tend to run out of steam, and then, like you said, we forget about them or we move past them or whatever. And I don't know, I in America, I think we really need to work on long-term sustaining kind of missions like that. It gets to the point that people run out of energy, and I understand why, but I wish we had a better answer for that, because longer term demonstrations like that in theory would be great, but where do we find the resources, even, or the people, like you said, willing to potentially just get the snot kicked out of them and arrested, of course, and all sorts of federal terrorist charges with these recent bills that expand broadly the language of what counts as terrorism,
right?
In
First
the country.
They came for the animal activists, right?
They
made them terrorists a long time ago. And now it's everybody. So I guess that's what I'm saying, is that, like, if somebody is feeling like chicken shit like me about protesting in person, you're not alone. I'm not trying to dissuade other people.
It's a normal way to feel. I'm
trying to make the weenies like me feel a little better. There are lots of reasons for not wanting to go get arrested when that's probably going to be the end result. Bring a phone number, by the way. If you don't bring your phone, make sure you have a phone number memorized, whoever you're going to call, if you're lucky enough to get a phone call. Lots of times you don't get phone calls. The worst thing I had witnessed before all this started happening was in 2004 at the Republican National Convention. There was some very brutally treated people. And my friend of mine, Ryan Janelle, actually made a movie while he was getting arrested. And he got stuck in these barbed wire fences along the river in New York. And they were literally like just trying to not get too close to the fence. And all they had done was show up, and they were outside of the free speech zones that Bush had set up where you were allowed to protest or whatever. And I remember thinking, oh, that's so terrifying. It's just so weird to think Bush is like so lightweight compared to what's happening now. And I was scared back then, you know what I mean? So I got scared a long time ago. So I don't want to, dissuade, and it's certainly, but yeah, it gets scary. And have the phone number. And again, National Lawyers Guild is often that phone number. It's the one that we use here in San Francisco. And it's a good one to have wherever you are, because they will make a note of you. The point is to make a note of you. And when I was protesting out after 9/11 in front of the immigration building, the National Lawyers Guild was keeping track of everyone that entered the building. This is when they had released the 13 bad countries. And if you were there, you had to you had to go to immigration right away and make sure your paperwork was correct, like whether you did anything wrong or whether there's anything wrong with your paperwork or not, because you belonged to the bad countries. And they were going into the immigration department on this pretense and not coming out. So they started tracking everybody that went in the building to make sure they came out. And if they didn't, they could go, hey, what happened to this person? And they're like, oh, they would often find them. And they'd be like, oh, they were still in the waiting room. We don't know what they were doing there. It's just like, oopsie. And then they would let a couple people out, only because there was a group of lawyers waiting outside at the end of every day that were there every day for a couple months. This was going on. And I wasn't qualified enough to be one of the people to take the names. They said I'd be more useful making my videos. So that's what I did. But do something. You got to have a plan. If you go to one of these protests, you got to have a group of people, more than one, that knows where you are. You got to have a phone number you're going to call. And yeah, you got to have a plan. So, and we'll be covering this stuff more in the coming weeks. And we're going to keep an eye on all these cases. I'll say his name again, Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, and other people. I've already got a list of the people. I think we're probably going to have a list of names that we might keep on our website of the people that we think are currently missing. And of course, if somebody sees something on the website, I'm always happy to hear, just like today. Oh, good. We had a picture of him when I thought we hadn't had one. I'm always happy to be wrong. But for the most part, I think there's about 20 or 30 people now whose names, and many people where they don't give the names, which I think is very interesting. Like this 2-year-old that got deported. And so you want to protect the people to a certain extent, but it's also harder to track them and stuff when you don't have their names. It might be harder to help them. I don't know which is worse at this point. But usually when we start paying attention to specific cases, then when there is a chance to help, whatever it is for that person, then we can put our resources towards helping that person. Or if somebody's lucky enough to get back and now they have nothing because they've probably lost their job and whatever else while it was all happening, and maybe we have to do a quick fundraiser or something. Like I said, I haven't figured out how we can help yet, but I'm trying to think of different ways that we can help these people directly with our community. And write me. I'm actually back on Aaron Swartz at Gmail, AaronSwartzAday@gmail.com. If you have any ideas, want to help out, people in the world, let me know. I don't know what the noise in the back. Does anyone know what that noise is in the background? It doesn't sound like a parrot this time. Okay, I don't know. It stopped. Okay, great. So on that happy note, as you know, this is the Aaron Swartz Day podcast and Aaron Swartz podcast. And Aaron wrote a lot about these kinds, often about a legal issue, a legal fine point issue or a constitutional issue having to do with the rights that were being violated again during Bush, when he and Cheney were setting the new standard for crazy shit that the government could get away with. Such a quaint time back then that when we look back. But Andre, our resident Aaron Swartz writings expert, is going to fill us in a little bit on some Aaron history in that regard, and then give us a little update on Bolsonaro, Brazil's Trump, and how things are going over there. Take it away, Andre.
So that's a great follow-up, because Aaron, despite talking about those things in 2006, he still is quite relevant, but what he's talking about. So Aaron is trying to explain to us, like, how did we get here? If we look at the past and see the things that Lisa was talking about that were already quite concerning, but less intense than now. And he wrote 7 texts about this subject, and the last one is how to fight back. So I was just going to glance over them quickly so we can get around his way of thinking. So the first text that Aaron wrote is shifting the terms of debate, how big business covered up global warming. And the funny thing is that this text starts talking about immigrants. He's saying that in 2004, there is this book, In Defense of Internment, that Michelle Malkin wrote, that is defending the use of concentration camps to put Japanese citizens in during World War II. So this is not really something that is completely new. The Americans have this history of treating certain populations as undesirables and thinking of concentration camps and prisons and deportation as something normal. And this is quite problematic for Aaron. And he's trying to show that this is not something that everyone agreed with. On the contrary, people were very against it. And something was made to change popular opinion on those topics. So he jumps to climate change to show how this is the same thing. When we're talking about climate change, in 1993, 88% of Americans were completely pro changes in policy and economy to stop global warming, stop climate change. And just 5 years later, after a lot of campaign and media press on the issue, the support was only 42%. I even looked around to see if I could find a more recent data, and the one I found in 2023 is 37%. So it's even worse now. Like, how did Americans got convinced that climate change is not real? From 88 to 37, that's like crazy. So the second text,
but it's worse than ever.
Yeah, it's getting worse. The second text that Aaron writes, it's making noise, how the far right think tanks get out the word, so how they convince people. And he's talking about how Heritage Foundation is spending millions of dollars in publicity, in advertisements, in paying journalists to write what they want. So we are now seeing during these elections the Projects 2025, and we see how these think tanks are still around and still producing the way we look at the country and think about things. And he is explaining that this Heritage Foundation even had a network that was basically a hotline where you could call them and there would be experts to show you the conservative view of any subject. So if you were a journalist and wanted someone to interview, you could just phone there and they would have someone that will say what you would like to be written on the newspapers. So that's how structured this thing is. It's not just
it's not a bad idea. I mean, it's not a bad idea. I could see it being used by the good guys.
Yeah, we could set up something like that.
In the same way, once again, they're so fucking organized with the spreading of the evil messages. Sometimes I got to just take notes. I got to tell you that that's not a bad idea to have a play. And a lot of organizations are, the EFF and the ACLU are like that. When you got to get that lawyer talking about civil rights, right? Oh, just call them and we can get it, about that stuff. So we have that. But anyway, go on.
So in the third text of this series, Aaron is talking about racism and how the book about the bell curve, the story about IQ tests, is completely unscientific and has been disproved a lot, but it still was made into a book and published and reviewed by journalists as it was some kind of new scientific evidence at the time. So this is the way that these think tanks operate. They produce stories that are usually over some kind of a big issue they are concerned about, like transgender or racism or economic policy. And they produce this material and try to circulate it despite debunking claims. So they're not worried about how accurate those books are. They're just wanting to get attention from media.
They're really good at picking titles that will come up when you search for good books on the same topic too, by the way.
Yeah, that's true.
Another thing, they'll literally have a book that's almost the same title with this whole other take on it. And again, it's just like, you know, good thinking. All right, go on.
So he goes on to further on this subject. He is talking now about spreading lies, how think tanks ignore facts. And he's writing how these organizations, they are even outed by their own ex-members. He's talking about the biography of David Brooke, where Blinded by the Right explains the process, how they get students that are just out of college and pay them huge salaries just to write about things they want. Instead of having some kind of independence intellectually, these people are just coerced from school to writing what they want. So it's some kind of early scientists without reputation to be looked upon that could be used to produce these materials. So there is actually a system of how to create these books. And he says that that's what happened with John Locke and the book More Guns, Less Crime, that have completely crazy claims that were also debunked, but was also completely spread over news and journalists, interviews and things like that to provide it legitimacy. So he goes through a fifth text saying Saving Business, the origins of right-wing think tanks, that he's talking about how these organizations came to be, the think tanks. And he's explaining that in 1960, there was this big attack on business in America. People were questioning how rich people did their business and how they were like neglecting social justice and employer-worker rights. So the tax on unions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were concerned that the intellectual class, most of the academia, were pro-left-wing views. So they needed to change that. So they started financing all these structures and these think tanks to try to change it. And it did work.
Yeah, like giving money to universities so that they hire a professor of whatever the fuck. And
yeah,
that will have your viewpoint. Yeah.
In the words of a right-wing important intellectual, there was the need of a guerrilla warfare where established high qualified scholars that would publish a steady flow of scholarly articles as counterintelligence. So it's like a war operation that you set up to make it happen.
It is. So it's propaganda. It's, you know, it's a propaganda campaign aimed at Americans. And it's certainly and it's really interesting how they have won a lot of those wars. I mean, that's how Trump got elected, basically, because it was able to be make it elite. Now you're an elite if you went to college and you want to talk about a scientific reason why something is a fact or something, right? Like that. Now it's those elites trying to tell us what to do all the time. Like they won that battle, you know, in a large part of the country. And it was really sad. And it was interesting when you were talking about wearing your mask, because there was that whole thing about not wearing your mask because the government told them to. And all those people that died because they were not wearing their mask, right? So they got COVID and died, right? Or, you know, got very sick. And so but it just showed how effective the propaganda was, though, to actually have people not wearing their masks when it was clear that you should be if you wanted to be careful, right? Because it was more important, it was wrong, it was right. You know, these people that aren't really worried about any of their other rights a lot of the time, but now they, you know, don't want to wear a mask. I mean, and like I said, I'm just taking notes a lot of times. I'm like, okay, you can't beat them, join them. Let's get some propaganda campaigns that give scientific facts. let's get some some propaganda that will make people pay attention. That's what we're going to need. We're going to need to get, and right now, to this country's credit, right? All the people that are like protesting at Tesla places, you know, at Tesla offices, and the people that are pissed off and making sure that they are heard, you know, to their credit, that they are doing that kind of thing. And I feel like if we had the right kind of propaganda, maybe there could be some kind of tipping point and we could get some of those brains back that are more, because like when you're worried about getting deported, it's hard to think about climate change.
And it was quite effective. Like they use the projections, the cutouts of Musk doing the gesture, and they did tank a lot of the company value. And many people that bought Teslas are regretting it and putting stickers saying that they bought it before they knew it and things like that. So it has an effect in the public view of the company and the government too.
I saw one last week. It said, I bought this before I knew Elon was crazy.
Yeah. And this is important because according to Aaron, the public policy of the Republicans is usually unpopular. So they can't really sell you policy. So they have to sell you other things. So that's why he wrote another article talking about hurting seniors, how the attack on Social Security was made. So there was this allegations during that time that Social Security would go bust and would have money enough to pay for the retirement of young people at that time. So this idea of the Social Security going bust is completely also disproven by scientists and how they do the math of how much money is needed to pay for Social Security. And this was, despite so, completely endorsed and repeated until people accepted that Social Security would be something that couldn't be managed in time. So that's an effort to propose the policy that was unpopular of private retirement and no longer any public retirement. That's something that the United States is going towards for a long time, and probably will go back to the discussions on policy.
Yeah, and it's elder abuse, in my opinion, to threaten this, because, and I have elders in my family that freak out, and then it's like oh my God, they're gonna cut it, and then okay, they're not gonna cut it, like later in the day or the next day it'll be like okay, it's okay, but they're always like this, like maybe once a week or something. I mean, it's getting to be pretty bad, and it's really mean, to be cutting them off, to be threatening on cutting them off, and it's always in this vague way too, right? It's never like, and I'm not saying it's not on the chopping block. Lord knows that they'll get rid of it if they can,
No.
But I just, in terms of, it's like, hey, it's kind of like deporting children that are, for no reason, or just all of these cruel fucking things that they're doing, that supposedly our government was better than that, and now our government isn't better than that. And it sucks because we're supposed to be, or traditionally seen as, some model for the world. I say that now, right? But that was the idea of having civil rights, and that was the whole fucking idea. And I know it was the idea by a bunch of slaveholders that when they made the Constitution. I got to say that. So basically, we grew up in our whole thing is hypocritical, and it has been from the start. And maybe this is the only way it was ever going to cave in on itself, but we have to believe there's enough of us. And I think that things would be worse if people weren't fighting back. And that was kind of
exactly. Our last text is just about how to fight back. So the 7th on the series, he's concerned of what we do since the situation is so bad. And then he was talking that when people are interviewing journalists and the people that do the job of talking about news and also scientific investigations and any kind of important information, there was a very concerning trend at the time that journalists were being fired. So the workforce was reduced by 60 to 90% on media outlets at the time in 2006. And today it's still true. There's little work for journalists, and usually less professionalized in the sense of like a gig work. And he said that we need to defend journalists, especially left-wing journalists, with our wallets. Like, we have to support them. And we need this discussion that fact-checking can't be a media role, in the sense that you can't expect the Fox News or CNN to be fact-checking everything, because most of these media conglomerates are in the hands of 6 different people, like 6 rich entrepreneurs. Now Jeff Bezos is one of them that has newspapers. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're not going to fact-check things, because it's against their interests sometimes. So we can't rely on them. What we should rely on...
Well, they don't get to be news then.
Yeah,
they're not going to fact check.
News. Yeah. So what should we rely on? Aaron thinks that the best thing would be some kind of crowdsourcing of news. So he quotes the example of South Korea, the All My News, and how most of the news produced by this is like crowdsourced. People that are normal citizens doing journalism and being helped by journalists to make it sound and be more correct. So this is kind of his ideal of the time. Of sometimes you can think of it as internet enthusiasm and optimism, but at the same time, it's like what we're doing those discussions here on this podcast. It's kind of we have to rely more on communities and crowdsource for news instead of just trusting the main institutions or strange specialists that appear on far-right programs and think tanks.
Yes, and there was a blossoming of citizen journalism at the time when he was writing this. That's important to remember.
That's true.
And that pretty much got snuffed out when corporations bought all the blogging platforms and stuffed them. And then Facebook, everyone started using the same centralized platforms instead of having their own blog. And a lot of the big bloggers went to work for regular media. And just the whole thing was almost over before it began. I think it was sort of like 2002 to 2008 or something like that. You know, it had already died out before Aaron's death in a lot of ways, maybe around 2010. But we had hope that the citizen, and it was working. The citizen journalism was working in the sense that if you were good at it, the majors would rip you off and print your story. They would talk about a story that they wouldn't have normally covered because you made it so easy for them. And all I would do is write them and thank them and not say, well, you ripped me off and didn't give me any credit, because I didn't give a shit. I was happy that they published the story and we had a secret relationship now. So it was like the last time that happened, it's been a long time. Last time it happened was when I published on Aaron Swartz Day, a whole thing about Aaron and RSS, and I called it an RSS revival. And 6 months later, Wired did a brilliant story and they called it an RSS revival. They even took the title, but then they went further and did a complete review of like 10 different really great RSS tools to really foster a real RSS revival. Here are the tools. You can go use them now. And so, you know, it still happens. That was like 5 years ago. So it still happens now and then, but less, because, like, again, citizen journalism is harder now because all journalists are being persecuted and kicked around when you actually try to go cover something. And yeah, it's just, but we need to bring that back. It was the answer then, and it's the answer now. And I bet we could have way better tools now that would make it easier for us to aggregate, to have, if you had a trusted community and there was, let's say it's back to, like, you know, the George Floyd days where there's like protests happening all around the country at the same time, we could probably have a platform, a trusted platform where they could upload that stuff as long as we were in charge of everything. And have a way, because it is helpful to aggregate information among trusted parties when you're trying to figure shit out, you know, but you can't do it, you know, in a Facebook group or whatever, when you're just on parade for whoever's going to collect information. And now you're on the wrong side of it. Like we were talking about earlier. Is there any other recommendations? Anything else you want to say about Aaron's words on fighting back before you?
I think that Aaron would also support our idea of a left-wing propaganda think tanks.
Yes.
And we have to think more about that and try to see what we can do about it, because it's really something that is getting more and more necessary. There is all these disinformation studies that point out how other countries that have less worth of minimum wage and weakened currencies, so the dollar is strong compared to them, they're being used for troll farms, like people being paid to be online all day producing disinformation or spreading disinformation or pretending to be certain groups of people to create a perception that is negative of them. So we can't really think of this industry and imagine that we can just like fight it with the same tools as always. We need to change our strategies and imagine a different kind of organization that can front this kind of menace.
Yes, we have to figure out, and without, it's funny, it's like we don't want to do their dirty work because some people say, oh, well, maybe we need to infiltrate their organizations, and that's really emotionally draining on a person to have to pretend, and stuff like that. It's one thing to get information and share it. It's another thing to actually have to like be in the same room with these people all the time every day and be actually spying on them. We don't really do that kind of stuff, right? We're not going to go that far like they are, to get or I would have a problem with it, but we need to change. Yeah, we need to change what we're doing. And I think it will involve bending some of our rules in terms of what we will do and won't do. Cause we're actually fighting like actual evil, hateful people that want to kill us now. I mean, it's like that line has been crossed. And I don't even know if, we always wonder, it always comes back to this, like, oh, what would Aaron think if he were here now? He would have watched it happen gradually like the rest of us. I think he would be doing things, but I don't think he would be shocked or whatever. I think he would have watched it happen like we all watched it happen.
I think we could organize the left internationally. So other countries that have left-wing activists that need less money to work, and they are also involved in the same kind of concerns, like the Trump of the tropics. I was talking about Bolsonaro, and how he's the same problem, so we have the same issues. We could do this kind of crowdsourcing over the world of people helping to promote things here in the United States and elsewhere also when that's needed. So this is not really something that is really expensive for us to imagine and organize. A lot of people will do this voluntarily. I think we just need to start the process somehow.
Yeah, and we already have, we have a very international community already with Aaron Swartz Day, and it's just about doing something as we approach our event, in November, and thinking about how we might be able to organize things. Bad Apple is coming back. Bad Apple is our police surveillance project that it's a database of wandering officers, basically those officers that get disciplined in one place and fired and then get hired by another city after internal affairs themselves have proclaimed them with sustained findings, they call it. If they're found guilty, it's their sustained findings. And that we're starting that up again now because we can throw AI at those reports to go through them faster, and we don't have to give somebody PTSD to actually read them, because it's really upsetting for somebody who did it for 2 weeks was all I did it for. I couldn't believe shit that is in these reports. This is the stuff they know about, right? So and we're trying to make that, so international. I think that's a great idea. That's the way to go, especially I have friends that don't live here anymore. People are leaving. A number of people that I know are leaving for different reasons. Some of them were already leaving, and some of them were like, "I'm going to get the fuck out of here after the election." But yeah, we'll talk more about that in the future for sure. And I love projects like that when we're actually like enacting a plan that we got from some idea Aaron had on his blog. We've actually done that with a lot of things. So this sounds like something that could be that and would be really useful. Yeah. Always privately. Nobody will know who you are. Just because we're up here doesn't mean that you will be publicly facing at all. I am all about doing things quietly and effectively. So you don't get as much credit. You don't get the credit afterwards either. That's the part. Yeah, you have to just be quiet about what the good stuff you did, but it still is useful and important and can make a difference. So give us would you call him Trump of the tropics?
Bolsonaro. Trump of the tropics. Yeah,
give us our Bolsonaro update.
Okay, so as I was explaining last time I've been here, Bolsonaro, the Trump of the tropics, is our last president that attempts a coup of state. He tried to kill Lula and Vice President also, and the Supreme Court Judge Alexandre de Moraes. And he has finally been accused formally by the prosecution, and his denouncement was finally accepted by the Supreme Court. So with 5 judges voting on accepting or not the denouncement, 5 said yes. So it was an unanimous decision to accept the accusation against him. And we have this funny situation where he's leaving the court, and having the press all over him, asking him questions. And some guy, this anonymous hero, decided that was a very good opportunity to show us that there is still humor in Brazil and that we are celebrating the possibility of having Bolsonaro in jail.
Okay, great. Show us the clip.
We'll play you here for it.
Alguém tem dúvida que a perseguição é em cima dele?
Mas ele não pode constar no inquérito.
Ele já estava fora. Pelo amor de Deus, né? Que falta de...
Presidente, pode... Presidente.
Cuidado, hein? Pode ser o...
Presidente,
sinal aí.
Presidente, como que o senhor... Como que é o papel do Eduardo nas eleições do ano que vem? Presidente, como que o senhor recepcionou a decisão da admissão da denúncia?
Não, calma lá. Saudade do tempo de quartel, estamos de corneta.
O senhor ainda vai discutir?
Tá previsto, o Valdemar tá lá.
O senhor vai conversar com ele?
Agora eu posso. Fiquei um ano passando do Valdemar. Ô, meu coração.
And what's that theme that it turned into?
So during the presidential campaign that Bolsonaro lost to Lula now, there was this song that said basically, it's time for Jair Bolsonaro to go away. That's the music he's playing, the theme of the campaign. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So
that's effective. That's effective.
Yeah.
You know, protesting.
Made news everywhere. There was this kind of laugh and memes about it. And it's some kind of activism that is way less risky for the person that is doing it. He was just
hopefully,
he was just notified by the police saying what you're doing here and all, and he said that he's in public place, and there was no accusation against him or nothing. He just left there.
Okay, so he got lucky because a lot of times you do get picked up after you do whatever you do, and then they usually do release you because you weren't actually doing anything illegal. But the trick is to get you to do something after you're picked up. Maybe you try to maybe you fight back and hit somebody, which you never ever want to do, by the way, because that turns into attacking them, assaulting a police officer, even though you're the one being assaulted first. I know it doesn't make sense, but that's what'll happen. And so if you think about it, the longer they hold you in custody, the longer there is for you to mess up and end up doing something that gives them the reason to keep you there, because that's all they got, right? You haven't broken any laws, technically, and if you know. So anyway, that was really great. And what's happened since then? Because that was a few weeks ago.
After this situation, Bolsonaro was put in the hospital again because he was feeling ill since he was stabbed. I also talked about that here in the other episode. He's having these recurrent problems in his stomach, but only happens when he is being persecuted or in facing justice. So that's very, very funny. It's quite timely. There was even memes about it saying that his stomach is going first to jail, being arrested and clamped already. But the thing is that even in the hospital after this surgery that he did to solve the issue, he was doing lives and like talking against the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court said, okay, so you are feeling well doing lives, and sent him documents of the case there so he can prepare himself. So it's like they're also getting used to this kind of strategies that the far right wants to use to try to make himself look pitiful and try to get public sympathy in his side. So hopefully this will be a very good thing, because just this week, other former president called Fernando Collor de Mello. He was the first president after Brazil became a democracy again after the military dictatorship.
Okay.
He has been sent to jail because of corruption. At the time, he was already a problematic president, but after many years being judged and getting free, he finally got again investigated because of more recent corruption, and they found him guilty, so he's in jail. So since we already have a president in jail now, maybe another one will follow soon.
Jeez.
To be like a progress.
It's so funny that they're so greedy. You would think that like you'd be glad that you get, like you got away with it. You got all your money. You're okay. You're set for life. No, you got to do more and
Yeah,
get
he spent
more. And
8
get
years
caught.
outside of politics and came back and started stealing again and got
He ran
caught.
out of money, I guess. That's what
Yeah.
happens, but it's just like, really, because they don't realize that if they get caught for whatever stupid shit they're doing now, it could reopen. It makes everybody look at the old stuff too, and yeah. Well, wait, you're not saying that these ex-presidents might actually do time in jail in Brazil? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Fernando Collor has been jailed for 8 years now. He will be in jail. I mean, is his sentence. So as things look forward to Bolsonaro having 30 years in jail, he'll probably die there if he's arrested.
But do you think that will really happen?
I think it will really happen. I mean, it's
Wow.
not looking good for him. And even his allies in Congress are not doing much. I think they're just thinking about how to replace him with another candidate. So I think they're just leaving him for, the blame.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thanks for the update and keep us posted as things progress.
Yeah.
It's nice to think. It's nice that there's somewhere where politicians actually, now do they have a version of Club Fed like we do where they're technically in jail, but they still have email access and all that stuff? Is it that kind of jail or is it like a real jail? Do you happen to know?
It's a real jail, but they have usually a special ward where it's a little less worse, but still jail.
Okay. All right. Well, only time will tell. Let's hope. Yeah. All right. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Both of you, I really appreciate having you to work with me as we move forward in 2025. And also Grant Ellis, who you don't see, is our wonderful producer who helps behind the scenes. And we are going to be doing a lot in the coming months at Aaron Swartz Day, getting ready for this event. I think we're going to do an actual hackathon again this year. And we're going to front load it a little bit more. So we're going to have some kind of event, maybe the end of the summer, to like kick off the projects. And then in November, we'll actually present the projects that have already been worked on as the plan for this year. So if you have something you're thinking about doing, yes, we're going to do a hackathon this year. I'm sure the Secure Drop people will already be there. They're always ready to do a hackathon when we're ready. We'll do something in conjunction with the Aaron Swartz Institute of Brazil, I'm sure. And you too can be a part of it. Let us know what you want to do. We're really trying to grow the community and get things going again. There's lots of stuff for us to do, obviously. And we can't wait to hear your ideas. And if you just want to help out with what we're already doing behind the scenes, that's great too. So let us know if you want to be a part of that. All right. That's it for this month. I'm not sure when we're going to do it in May yet, but probably in the middle of the month is when we try to do it. And we will see you again next month. Thank you so much. Bye.